The champagne flutes gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than my monthly rent. I moved through the crowd like a ghost in a black uniform, balancing a tray of canapés that cost what I made in a day. February in Milan turned the streets into knives of cold, but inside the Palazzo Verdi, warmth pressed against silk and cashmere. No one looked at servers. We were furniture with pulses. I'd been working the circuit for 3 months. Weddings, galas, corporate events, anything that paid under the table and didn't ask for papers I couldn't provide. My work visa had expired in September. My grandmother's medication cost more than I could explain to anyone who hadn't watched someone fade in real time. The north corner of the ballroom held a cluster of men in suits cut too precisely to be anything but custom. They didn't drink. They watched. One stood apart from the others, taller, his dark hair swept back in a way that suggested both control and indifference to opinion. His cologne reached me before I got within 3 meters, bergamot and something darker, like leather left in winter rain. When his eyes found mine, I felt it like a change in air pressure. I offered the tray. He didn't take anything, just studied my face with the kind of attention that made my pulse stutter. Then his phone rang and he turned away and I became invisible again. I told myself that was what I wanted. My phone buzzed in my pocket 20 minutes later. I slipped into the service corridor, the noise of the party muffling behind the heavy door. The number was the hospice. My hands shook as I answered. Signorina Bellini. The nurse's voice was tight with urgency. "Si sono io," I said, switching without thinking. "Cosa è grave successo?" "Sua nonna, her breathing is labored. The doctor says you should come tonight if you can." My throat closed. "Arrivo subito, per favor dilci arrivo." I ended the call and leaned against the wall, trying to remember how to breathe. The corridor smelled like commercial cleaner and desperation. When I opened my eyes, he was standing 3 meters away. The man from the ballroom, close enough that I could see his eyes were the color of espresso and just as unreadable. "Italian," he said, not a question. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Native." I nodded, wiping at my face. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and held it out. Linen, monogrammed. I took it because refusing felt more dangerous than accepting. "Your grandmother," he said. "She's ill." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "The hospice called, I need to go." "Which hospice?" I shouldn't have told him, but exhaustion makes you stupid and fear makes you desperate. "Santa Margherita, in Brera." He pulled out his phone, typed something, then looked at me again. "What's your name?" "Livia." "Livia?" He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Dante Morti, you're Sicilian." "My grandmother is. I grew up in America." "But you speak like you never left Palermo." "She raised me. After my parents, I stopped. This man didn't need my biography. I should go." "My driver will take you." "I can take the metro." "My driver will take you," he repeated, and this time it wasn't an offer. "Wait here." He disappeared through the service door. I stood there holding his handkerchief, wondering what kind of man carried linen and had drivers on standby at 10 at night. The kind you saw in the corner of ballrooms, surrounded by men who didn't drink. The kind you didn't want noticing you. 5 minutes later, a woman in a sharp gray suit appeared. "Signorina Bellini, I'm Carlotta. Mr. Morty asked me to escort you." The car was a black Mercedes with windows tinted past legal limits. The driver didn't speak. Carlotta sat beside me in the back, her presence both comfort and warning. We moved through Milan's streets like water, every light turning green as we approached. "Mr. Morty wants to see you tomorrow," Carlotta said as we pulled up to the hospice. 2 o'clock, this address." She handed me a card, heavy stock embossed lettering, an office building in the financial district. "He'll have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The kind that solves problems." My grandmother was sleeping when I reached her room. Her breathing rattled like coins in a jar. The nurse said she'd stabilized, but stabilized was a relative term when you were dying. I held her hand and listened to the machines beep their steady rhythm of borrowed time. At dawn, I checked my bank account on my phone. 43 euros. The medication she needed cost 200 a week. I had 6 days before we ran out. I looked at the card Carlotta had given me, turned it over. The paper felt expensive between my fingers, the kind of expensive that suggested problems really could be solved, if you were willing to pay the price. I thought about his eyes in the corridor, the way he'd said my name, the driver who materialized like magic. I went home, slept for 3 hours, and put on the only professional clothes I owned. A black sheath dress I'd bought at a charity shop in Ballet Flats with the heel worn down on one side. At 1:45, I stood outside a glass tower that reflected the sky back at itself. The lobby was all marble and men in security uniforms who looked at me like they could see the price of my shoes. Carlotta met me at the elevator, 20th floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that smelled like his cologne. She led me past assistants who didn't look up from their screens, through a door that opened with a whisper, into an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Duomo. Dante Morti stood with his back to me, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking rapid Italian, his voice pitched low, something about shipping manifests and customs delays. When he ended the call, he turned. Livia, sit. There were 2 chairs across from his desk. I chose the one closer to the door. He noticed, smiled slightly. How is your grandmother? Stable. That's not the same as better. No. He opened a folder on his desk, scanned something, then looked at me. You're working illegally. 3 different catering companies in as many months. You're living in Bovisa in an apartment with 5 other people. Your visa expired 5 months ago. You should have been deported by now. My mouth went dry. Are you with immigration? No, he closed the folder. I'm offering you a job. Doing what? I have business interests that require discretion and fluency. You speak Italian like you were born to it, and you're American enough to navigate both worlds. I need a translator, an assistant, someone who can move through rooms and hear what's being said when people think the help doesn't understand. You want me to spy? I want you to listen and translate, and occasionally accompany me to events where having someone who looks like they belong is useful. He leaned back. The pay is 5,000 euros a month, cash, plus housing and medical care for your grandmother, a real hospice, not the state facility, Swiss doctors if we need them. 5,000 euros. I made that in 4 months if I was lucky. What's the catch? You work when I need you. You don't ask questions about things that don't concern you. You don't discuss what you see or hear, and you don't leave without notice. How long? 6 months. If it works, we renegotiate. I should have said no, should have walked out, but I thought about my grandmother's breathing, the rattle that got worse every week, the pills I couldn't afford, the debt that kept growing like something alive. I need the first payment up front. He opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope, set it on the desk between us. 10,000, 2 months advance. Carlotta will help you move your things today and arrange your grandmother's transfer. You start tonight, there's a dinner in Monza, 8 o'clock. Carlotta has a dress for you. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy, real. Why me? Because you answered a phone call in Italian when you thought no one was listening. He stood, buttoned his jacket. Because you came to work the next day even though your world was ending. And because when I checked, I found out your grandfather was Giovanni Bellini. The name hit me like cold water. You knew my grandfather. My father did, a long time ago. His expression shifted, something almost like regret crossing his features. We'll discuss it later. Carlotta is waiting. I left the office holding an envelope full of money that felt like a chain wrapped in silk. In the elevator, I counted it twice. All there. crisp hundreds that smelled like possibility and danger in equal measure. Carlotta drove me back to Bovisa, helped me pack my single suitcase and 2 boxes of books. Didn't comment on how little I had. We stopped at the hospice, where she spoke to the director in tones that suggested negotiation was not on the table. By 5 o'clock, my grandmother was being transferred to a private facility in Monza with a garden view and nurses who smiled like they meant it. "The dress is at your new apartment," Carlotta said as we drove north. "Mr. Morty asked me to tell you, jewelry is optional tonight, but if you wear any, keep it simple. These dinners have their own language." "What kind of dinners?" "The kind where everyone is polite and no one says what they mean." She glanced at me. "You'll do fine. Just remember, you're there to listen, not to be heard." The apartment was in a building with actual security, not just a broken buzzer. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with appliances that worked, windows that closed properly. The dress hung in the closet, midnight blue silk that moved like water when I touched it. Shoes that fit perfectly. Someone had measured me without asking. I stood in the shower until the hot water ran cold, trying to wash away the feeling that I just signed something I couldn't read. When I got out, there was a text from an unknown number. "Car at 7:30. Don't be late. D." I put on the dress. It fit like it had been made for me. Maybe it had. In the mirror, I looked like someone else, someone who belonged in ballrooms instead of serving in them. The thought made my chest tight. At 7:25, I went downstairs. The Mercedes was already waiting. The dinner was in a villa north of Monza, the kind of place that had been in the same family for 300 years and looked like it. Dante met me at the entrance, his hand finding the small of my back as we walked in. The touch was light, guiding, but I felt the weight of ownership in it. "Stay close," he said quietly. "If anyone asks, you're my associate. You're here to enjoy the evening, that's all." The dining room seated 30. I recognized faces from newspapers, politicians, industrialists, a judge I'd seen on television. The food was art arranged on plates. The wine was older than I was. Everyone spoke in careful euphemisms, their words wrapped in layers of meaning I had to parse in real time. Dante introduced me to a man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Livia, this is Carlo Tessari. Carlo owns half the shipping ports in northern Italy." "A pleasure," Carlo said, kissing my hand. His cologne was too sweet. "Dante, you've been holding out on us. Where did you find such a treasure?" "She found me," Dante said smoothly, "at a very cold event where the service was better than the company." Carlo laughed, but his eyes stayed flat. "American." "With better taste than most," I said in English, then switched to Italian. "Though I've learned that Milan has its own definition of hospitality." "She speaks," Carlo turned to Dante. "Careful, my friend, the smart ones are dangerous." "Only if you give them reason to be," Dante replied. His hand pressed slightly against my back. A signal. I smiled and said nothing. Later, standing on the terrace while the men smoked cigars and discussed things they thought I couldn't hear, I caught fragments of conversation in dialects I'd grown up with. Sicilian, Calabrese. They talked about shipments and delays, about payments and people who needed persuading. Nothing explicit. Everything understood. Dante appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. "Learning anything?" "That everyone here is very polite." "That's the first lesson. The second is that politeness has rules." He handed me a glass. "You did well tonight." I barely said anything. "Exactly." He touched his glass to mine. "Welcome to my world, Livia. Try not to drown in it." I sipped the champagne and watched the lights of Monza spread out below us like scattered diamonds. Somewhere down there, my grandmother was sleeping in a room with clean sheets and medication that worked. I'd bought her time. I just wasn't sure yet what it would cost me. When we got back to the city, Dante's driver pulled up to my building first. He walked me to the door even though Carlotta was in the car. At the entrance, he stopped. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Carlotta will brief you on this week's schedule. There's a folder in your apartment, background on the key people in my circle. Read it, memorize it, ask questions if you need to." He paused. "And Livia, that money you're holding, it's not charity. You'll earn every euro, but you'll also be protected. As long as you're with me, no one touches you. Understand?" "Who would want to touch me?" His smile was cold. "In my world, everyone who wants to hurt me." He left me standing there with champagne on my breath and fear crawling up my spine. Inside the apartment, I found the folder on the coffee table. 50 pages, maybe more. Names, photos, business holdings, family connections. A map of power drawn in organizational charts and offshore accounts. I sat on the couch and started reading. By page 10, I understood that Dante Morti didn't just have business interests. He had an empire built on legitimate fronts and illegitimate foundations. Logistics companies that moved more than freight. Real estate holdings that laundered more than money. I should have run, should have taken the money and disappeared before morning. Instead, I kept reading, because my grandmother was alive, because I had a place to sleep where the heat worked, because somewhere between the cold ballroom and this warm apartment, I'd stopped being invisible. And because when Dante Morti looked at me, I didn't feel like furniture anymore. I felt seen, and that was more dangerous than anything in the folder. The Swiss specialist arrived 3 days later. His name was Dr. Keller, and he had the kind of reputation that came with price tags I couldn't fathom. Dante had sent him, not asked if I wanted him, just arranged it the way he arranged everything, with quiet efficiency and the assumption that his help would be accepted. I met him at the hospice. My grandmother was awake, propped up against pillows that actually supported her. The new facility had changed everything. She had color in her cheeks. She smiled when she saw me. "Livia Cara, you look like you're sleeping." "I am Nana," I kissed her forehead. "There's a doctor here to see you, a specialist." Dr. Keller was kind in the way of men who delivered bad news so often they'd learned to coat it in gentleness. He examined her, asked questions in careful Italian, made notes in a leather journal. When he finished, he gestured for me to follow him into the hall. "Your grandmother has maybe 3 months," he said. 4 if we're lucky. The cancer is too advanced for intervention, but I can adjust her medication to give her comfort and clarity. She'll have good days." "Thank you." "Thank Mr. Morty. He's paying my consultation fee, which is not insignificant." He studied me with eyes that had seen too much. "Be careful with men who solve problems, Signorina. The debt is never just financial." He left and I stood in the hallway trying to parse the warning. When I went back to my grandmother's room, she was looking out the window at the garden. "This place is expensive, Livia." "I got a new job, it pays well." "And who is this employer who sends Swiss doctors?" She turned to look at me, her gaze still sharp despite everything. "Don't lie to an old woman who's dying. I can see the truth on your face." I sat in the chair beside her bed. "His name is Dante Morti. I work as his translator." Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, fear. "Morty. You know the name." "I knew his father a long time ago." She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Livia Cara, listen to me. That family, they're not what they seem. Your grandfather, he had dealings with them before you were born, before." She stopped, coughing. I held a water glass to her lips. When she could breathe again, she said, "Be careful. Men like that, they don't give without expecting something back." "I know, Nana." "Do you?" Her eyes were wet. "Promise me something. Promise me you'll keep your own heart. Don't give it to someone who sees love as leverage." I promised because she needed to hear it. But I thought about Dante's hand on my back at the villa, the way he'd said my name in the corridor, the careful distance he maintained even as he drew me closer. I wasn't sure my promise was one I could keep. That evening Dante sent a car for me, not the Mercedes, a smaller sedan, less obvious. The driver took me to a restaurant in Briera, the kind of place with no sign and a door you had to know to find. Inside, it was all exposed brick and candles, intimate without being romantic. Dante was already there, sitting at a corner table with a view of the entrance. Always the view of the entrance. He stood when I arrived. "How is she?" "Better, the medication is helping." I sat across from him. "Dr. Keller said 3 months." "Then we make them good months." He poured wine, red, probably worth more than my old monthly rent. "Have you been reading the files?" "Every night." "What have you learned?" "That you're careful about who you trust. That most of your business is legitimate or legitimately structured. And that you have rivals who aren't as careful about appearances." "Good," he leaned back. "There's a complication. Carlo Tessari, you met him at the villa. He's been asking about you, where you came from, who your people are." My stomach tightened. "Why?" "Because I introduced someone new into the circle and that makes people nervous. They want to know if you're a liability." He paused. "I need you to be visible for a while, attend events with me, be seen. The more normal you appear, the less interesting you become." "I'm not sure I know how to be normal in your world." "You're doing fine, just be yourself." A broke American with an expired visa. A smart woman who knows when to listen and when to speak. His expression softened slightly. "I wouldn't have hired you if I thought you couldn't handle this." The food arrived, pasta that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it, even though we were in a restaurant that probably had 3 Michelin stars. We ate in comfortable silence, and I found myself relaxing despite everything. Dante asked about my grandmother, about where I'd grown up, about books I'd read. Normal conversation. Almost like a date, if dates happened with men who had empires and enemies. When we finished, he walked me out. On the sidewalk, he stopped. "There's a formal dinner on Saturday. At La Scala, I need you there." "What kind of dinner?" "The kind where people wear their money and their connections. Wear something elegant. Carlotta will handle the details." He hesitated, then added, "And Livia, if anyone asks about us, about our relationship, tell them the truth. You work for me, nothing more. It's safer that way." "Safer for whom?" "Both of us." He put me in the car and watched until we pulled away. I turned to look back and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who just made a decision he wasn't entirely happy about. I spent Saturday afternoon in Carlotta's capable hands. She took me to a boutique where the clothes didn't have price tags because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford them. The dress she chose was emerald silk with a neckline that was elegant without being obvious. Shoes that made my legs look longer than they were. Hair swept up to show my neck. "You'll do," she said, studying me in the mirror. Then she opened a velvet box. Inside was a pendant, a single pearl on a gold chain. "From Mr. Morty. He said to tell you it's a loan, not a gift. Don't read into it." But I did read into it. The pearl was perfect, lustrous, the kind of thing that cost more than I'd made in my entire life. I put it on and felt the weight of it settle against my collarbone like a claim. At La Scala, the dinner was in a private dining room overlooking the stage. 30 guests, all of them important in ways that didn't require explanation. I recognized a member of parliament, 2 CEOs whose companies I'd read about in the files, and a woman who I was fairly certain ran one of the oldest families in Milan. Dante introduced me simply. "This is Livia. She's working with me on some international projects." They smiled and filed me away as irrelevant, which was fine. I was there to listen. Halfway through the meal, I caught a conversation in Sicilian between 2 men 3 seats down. They thought no one could understand. They were discussing a problem, someone who'd been too curious about certain shipments. They needed to have a conversation with him. The euphemisms were so polite they were almost comic. I glanced at Dante. He was watching me, a question in his eyes. I touched the pearl at my throat, the signal Carlotta had taught me. I heard something. He gave the smallest nod and turned back to his own conversation. After dinner there was dancing. An orchestra, champagne, women in gowns that cost more than cars. Dante found me on the terrace. "Tell me." I repeated the conversation. He listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When I finished, he said, "That's Tessari's people. They're getting aggressive." "What will you do?" "What I always do, handle it quietly." He held out his hand. "Dance with me." "Here?" "Why not?" The terrace was empty, but music drifted from inside. I let him pull me close, his hand settling at my waist, mine on his shoulder. We moved slowly, and I was aware of everything: his cologne, the way his suit fit, the fact that I could feel his heartbeat through the fabric. "You're good at this," I said. "At dancing. At making people feel safe when they shouldn't." He smiled, but it was edged with something I couldn't name. "And do you feel safe, Livia?" "I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something I don't understand." "Good, that means you're paying attention." He spun me gently, then pulled me back. "The pearl suits you. You said it was a loan." "It is, but that doesn't mean I don't like how it looks on you." Someone called his name from inside. He released me immediately, the warmth of his hand leaving my waist like a withdrawal. "I need to take this. Stay close." He disappeared inside, and I was alone on the terrace with the night, and the feeling that I just stepped across a line I hadn't known was there. When Carlotta drove me home later, she said, "He doesn't usually give jewelry, even on loan." "What does that mean?" "It means you should be careful, Livia. He's careful about what he cares about. And when Dante Morty cares about something, it becomes a target." That night I lay in bed and touched the pearl still at my throat. I should have taken it off. Should have put it back in the velvet box and remembered that it wasn't mine, that none of this was mine. Not the apartment, not the money, not the way he'd looked at me when we danced. But I left it on, and that, I knew, was my first real mistake. The weeks blurred into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Days spent studying files and attending meetings where I translated not just words but intent. Nights at dinners and events where I learned to read the room like a language of its own. Dante was demanding but never cruel, precise but never cold. He asked my opinion, listened when I spoke, trusted me with information that could destroy him if I chose to use it. I started to understand the shape of his world. The logistics companies were real, moved real freight, employed real people. But they also moved things that customs didn't need to see. The real estate holdings housed businesses, but also provided distance between money and its origins. Everything was structured in layers, legitimate fronts hiding illegitimate foundations, and Dante sat at the center like a spider in a web made of silk and steel. My grandmother was having her good days. I visited every morning before work, brought her pastries from the bakery she'd loved when she was young, read to her from books in Italian that made her smile. She asked about Dante. I told her the truth, that he was complicated, that I was being careful, that I hadn't forgotten her warning. "But you're falling anyway," she said one morning, watching my face. "I can see it." "Nana." "It's all right, Kara. The heart doesn't ask permission. Just remember what I said. Keep enough of yourself that you can walk away if you need to." But walking away was starting to feel impossible. Not because of the money or the apartment or the safety. Because of the moments in between. The way Dante brought me coffee without asking how I took it, because he'd noticed. The way he listened when I talked about books. The late nights in his office when work became conversation, became something that felt like intimacy without ever crossing the line into anything I could name. Then came the gallery opening in Milan. Modern art in a converted industrial space, wine that tasted like grapes had been grown in heaven. Dante moved through the crowd with ease, discussing technique and composition with an expertise that surprised me. "You know art," I said when we were alone in front of a canvas that was mostly black with a slash of red. "My mother was a curator. Before she died, she made sure I could tell a Caravaggio from a convincing fake." He studied the painting. She said art was the only honest thing in our family. Everything else was performance. Was she right? Usually, he glanced at me. But not always. Some things are real even when they look like performance. Before I could ask what he meant, Carlo Tessari appeared with a woman in diamonds and a smile that suggested she knew exactly how beautiful she was. Dante Caro and the lovely Livia, how domestic you two look. Carlo, Dante's tone could have cut glass. I didn't expect to see you here. Modern art isn't usually your taste. I'm broadening my horizons, Francesca insisted. He gestured to the woman. You know my wife, of course. A pleasure, Signora Tessari. She looked me over like I was a painting she was considering purchasing. So this is the famous translator. Dante has been very secretive about you. There's nothing secret, I said smoothly. I'm just here to work and enjoy the art. How refreshingly American. Her smile didn't waver. Tell me, do you enjoy all aspects of Dante's world, or just the glamorous parts? It was a trap dressed in polite conversation. Dante's hand found my back, the touch a warning and a comfort. Livia has excellent judgment about what does and doesn't concern her, he said. It's one of her more valuable qualities. Carlo laughed. Ever the diplomat, we should have dinner soon, Dante. There are matters we should discuss, business matters. Call my office. Carlotta will arrange it. They drifted away, and I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. He doesn't like me. He doesn't trust you, that's different. Dante guided me toward the exit. We're leaving. The event isn't over. It is for us. In the car, he was silent, tense. I'd learned to read his moods, the set of his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he was calculating moves and countermoves. We were halfway back to my apartment when he said, Tessari is making a play. The question's about you, showing up tonight with his wife, it's theater. He's trying to rattle me. Is it working? No, but it's annoying. He looked at me. I need you to be more careful. Watch what you say, who you talk to. Tessari has people everywhere and he'll use anything he can find. What does he want? What everyone wants, more. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to move you. Different apartment, better security, and your grandmother, I think we should relocate her too. There's a facility in Como, very private, very secure. Dr. Keller recommends it. You think Tessari would go after my grandmother? I think men like him use whatever leverage they can find. And right now, you're leverage against me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Then maybe I should leave, I said quietly. Go back to America. Let you handle your business without complications. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want anymore. He leaned forward and told the driver to pull over. We were on a quiet street in Porta Romana, streetlights casting shadows through the trees. Dante turned to face me. I'm going to tell you something and I need you to listen. You're not just an employee, Livia. You haven't been for a while. And that's a problem because in my world caring about someone makes them a target. But I'm not letting you go. Not because I own you, but because if you leave now, Tessari will see it as weakness. And weakness gets people killed. So I'm trapped. You're protected, there's a difference. He reached out and touched the pearl at my throat, his fingers grazing my skin. This isn't a chain, it's a promise. While you wear this, while you're with me, no one touches you. But if you want to leave, if you really want to walk away, I'll arrange it. I'll make sure you and your grandmother are safe. You'll have enough money to start over anywhere you want. Just say the word. I should have said it, should have taken the out he was offering. But I thought about the last few weeks, the rhythm we'd fallen into, the way he made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than furniture with a pulse. I thought about my grandmother in her garden room, having good days because of him. I thought about the way he'd looked at me when we danced. I'm not leaving, I said. Something in his expression shifted. Relief maybe, or regret. Then we do this my way. No arguments. I move you, I move your grandmother, and you don't question the security measures. Agreed. Agreed. He leaned in, and for a heartbeat I thought he was going to kiss me. But he stopped, his lips an inch from mine, and said, "You're going to make me do something stupid one of these days, Livia Bellani." Then he pulled back and told the driver to take us home. The new apartment was in a building with actual security, cameras, guards, access cards. The penthouse had windows that overlooked the entire city and rooms I didn't know how to fill. Carlotta helped me move my pathetic collection of belongings, which looked ridiculous in all that space. Mr. Morty wanted you to know, the building is owned by one of his holding companies. You're not in any registries. As far as the government is concerned, this place doesn't exist. That's comforting and terrifying. She smiled. Welcome to the life, you get used to it. My grandmother's move to Como was handled with the same efficiency. The facility was beautiful, a converted villa overlooking the lake, with gardens and private nurses, and a level of care that made the previous hospice look like a warehouse. When I visited her there, she was sitting by a window with sun on her face. "This is too much, Livia." "You deserve it, Nana." "What I deserve and what I've earned are different things." She took my hand. "Sit with me, tell me the truth. Are you in danger?" "Number Dante is being careful." "Dante, you call him by his first name now." "He's my employer." "He's more than that. I can see it in how you talk about him," she sighed. "I knew his father, Paolo Morty, not well but enough. Your grandfather did business with him a long time ago, before I knew the kind of business it was. Before—" She stopped, her breathing labored. "Nana, don't." "No, you need to hear this. Your grandfather, he owed Paolo Morty money, a gambling debt. Paolo could have destroyed us, could have taken everything, but he didn't. He forgave the debt, said it was a gift because we had a baby to feed your mother. He saved us, Livia. And then years later, when your grandfather could repay it, he did. He worked for Paolo, helped him build the legitimate fronts. It was honor, Cara, not obligation, choice." I sat very still. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because debt becomes choice. Because the Mortys understand loyalty. And because I think his son is falling in love with you, and you need to know what that means." "Nana." "Let me finish. Men like Dante, they don't fall easily. But when they do, they fall completely. And that kind of love, it's not soft. It's fierce. It protects, but it also possesses. You need to decide if you can live with that, if you want to." I stayed with her until she fell asleep, then drove back to Milan with her words echoing in my head. Debt becomes choice. The Mortys understand loyalty. I thought about Dante arranging everything, the money, the doctors, the safety, not as payment but as care, as a kind of love that expressed itself in acts of service, in problems solved before I knew they existed. When I got back to the apartment, there was a message on my phone. "Come to the office. Now, D." Carlotta picked me up 20 minutes later. She was tense in a way I'd never seen before, her hands tight on the steering wheel. "What happened?" I asked. "Tessari made his move. Financial police raided 3 of our logistics warehouses this morning. They have warrants, investigators, the whole apparatus. Someone gave them detailed information about our operations." "Did they find anything?" "Enough to be a problem. Mr. Morty is handling it, but it's going to get complicated." At the office, Dante was in his study, a room I'd never been in before, all dark wood and locked filing cabinets. He was standing at the window, jacket off, tie loosened. When I came in, he turned. "We need to leave Milan tonight." "Leave?" "Tessari used the financial police as a weapon. They're going to freeze my accounts, tie up my operations. It's a move designed to force me to negotiate from weakness. I'm not doing that." He crossed to a safe in the wall, entered a code, pulled out passports and cash. "I have a place in the Alps, secure off the grid. We'll go there until this settles." "What about my grandmother?" "Already arranged. Dr. Keller is with her now. She'll stay at the facility. Tessari has no reason to go after her if you're gone. But you can't stay here. If he can't use you as leverage, he'll try something else." And if I refuse? He stopped, looked at me. Then I put you on a plane to America tonight with enough money to never worry again, but I'd prefer you stayed. Why? Because you're not just leverage, Livia. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. Because I need you, not for business, not for translation, I just need you. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said, the most vulnerable, and it scared me more than any of the danger. Okay, I said, I'll come. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. I'm going to kiss you now. If you don't want that, say so. I didn't say anything. He kissed me carefully like I might break. His hand cupped my face, thumb stroking my cheek, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, his mouth on mine, gentle and claiming at once. When he pulled back, he pressed his forehead to mine. That was probably a mistake, he said. Probably. I don't regret it. Neither do I. He smiled, tired but real. Pack light, we leave in an hour. The drive to the Alps took most of the night. Dante drove himself, which told me how serious this was. He never drove. The roads curved up into mountains, past villages that were dark and sleeping. Dawn was breaking when we finally arrived at a house tucked into a fold of rock and pine trees, invisible unless you knew to look for it. Inside it was warm. A fire already laid, food in the refrigerator, beds made. Someone had prepared it. Carlotta, probably. Dante dropped our bags and went straight to a laptop, checking messages, making calls in low tones. I made coffee, found bread and cheese, watched the sun rise over peaks that looked like they'd been there since the world began. It's beautiful, I said when he joined me at the window. It was my mother's. She bought it before she married my father, kept it in her name, said everyone needed a place that was just theirs. He took the coffee I offered. I used to come here as a kid when things got too loud at home. It was the only place where I felt like I could breathe. Thank you for bringing me. Thank you for coming. He set down the cup and turned to face me. I need to tell you something about your grandfather and my father, about the debt your grandmother mentioned. She told me about the gambling debt, how your father forgave it. That's part of it, but there's more. He was quiet for a moment, choosing words. When my father died, I found letters between him and your grandfather. They weren't just business associates. They were friends, real friends. Your grandfather helped my father build the legitimate businesses, yes, but he also talked him out of darker paths, convinced him that empires built on fear don't last, that loyalty earned is stronger than loyalty coerced. I didn't know. How could you? Your grandfather died before you were born, but his influence, it shaped my father, and my father shaped me. The way I run things, the lines I don't cross, the choice to build something that can transition to legitimate, that comes from lessons learned from your grandfather. So when I saw you in that corridor, speaking Italian like you were born to it, and I found out who you were, he paused. It felt like fate, like I owed him this, owed him you. I processed this, so I'm what payment on an old debt. No, you're a chance to honor it, there's a difference. He reached out, touched my face. The debt was my reason to notice you, but it's not why I need you here. That's something else entirely. And what is that? You make me want to be better than what I am. You make me think about legacy instead of just survival. He stopped, frustrated with words. You're not furniture, Livia, you never were, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. I kissed him this time, rising on my toes, pulling him down to me. It was different from the first kiss, less careful, more urgent. His hands found my waist, pulled me closer. I felt the tension in him, the control he was exercising, and pushed against it until he made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. We should probably slow down, he said. Probably. I'm not very good at slow. I've noticed. He laughed, and it was real, unguarded. Stay with me, Livia, not because of debt or danger or money. Stay because you want to. I want to, I said, and meant it. We spent 3 days in that house while Dante worked remotely, making calls, moving pieces on a board I couldn't entirely see. I read, cooked meals that were simple but filling, sat by the fire while snow started to fall outside. At night, we shared a bed, and he held me like I was something precious, but we didn't go further. Some boundary we both respected, even as we pushed against it. On the fourth morning, Carlotta called. Dante took it in the other room, and when he came back, his expression was carefully neutral. Tessari's case is falling apart. The financial police found inconsistencies in their warrants. Someone expedited the paperwork, didn't follow procedure. My lawyers are tearing it to pieces. We can go back. Is it over? Not yet, but we're winning. He sat beside me on the couch. There's something else. I had a conversation with Tessari, a real one, not performance. I offered him a deal, he backs off. I help him restructure his operations to withstand legal scrutiny. Everyone wins, no one loses face. And he agreed. He's considering it, but he wanted assurances about you. My stomach tightened. What kind of assurances? That you're not a weakness he can exploit, that you understand what you've gotten into, that you're making choices with your eyes open. He took my hand. So I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Can you live with what I am? Not what I want to be, not the version that transitions to legitimate. What I am right now, the gray areas, the compromises, the things I do that aren't strictly legal. I thought about it, really thought. I don't know, ask me in 6 months. That's honest. It's the best I can do. It's enough. He pulled me closer. One more thing. When we go back, things are going to change. I'm going to be more visible with you. Let people see that you're not just an employee, that you matter. It's going to make you more of a target, but it's also going to make you safer, because hurting you becomes hurting me, and no one wants that. So I become armor. You become off limits. There's a difference. I wasn't sure I believed that, but I nodded anyway. We returned to Milan a week later. The city felt different, or maybe I felt different. Dante moved through his world with more confidence now, less caution. He introduced me as his partner, deliberately vague, deliberately public. At dinners, his hand stayed at my waist. At meetings, he asked my opinion openly. He was marking territory, making a statement. The pearl necklace was joined by other pieces, earrings, a bracelet. Still loans, he insisted, still temporary. But I knew better. These were claims dressed in jewelry. Tessari accepted the deal. The financial police investigation dissolved into bureaucratic confusion. Dante began the slow process of transitioning his empire, moving assets, restructuring companies, building distance between the legitimate fronts and the gray operations underneath. It would take years, he said, but it was necessary. The world was changing. They had to change with it. My grandmother continued to fade, but gently. I visited her every day, brought stories about my life that I edited for her peace of mind. She knew anyway, saw it in my face. You love him, she said one afternoon in late spring. Yes. And he loves you. I think so, he's never said it. Men like him don't say it, Cara, they show it, in how they protect you, how they listen, how they make space for you in their lives. She touched my face. Your grandfather showed me every day for 40 years, never said the words, but I knew. I'm scared, Nana, scared I'm going to lose myself in this, in him. Then don't. Keep pieces of yourself that are just yours. Have dreams that don't involve him. Build a life that could exist without him, even if you never wanted to. That's not preparing to leave. That's maintaining your dignity. How do I do that? You start by going back to school. Finish your degree. Not because he's paying for it, but because you want it. You find work that matters to you, even if you don't need the money. You remember who you were before you met him, and you protect her. I enrolled at Bocconi in the fall. International Relations. Dante didn't question it, just asked what classes I was taking and if I needed anything. He rearranged my schedule to accommodate it, treated it as seriously as he treated his own business. "I'm proud of you," he said one night, finding me studying at the kitchen table of the penthouse. "For going back to school. For choosing something that's yours." I looked up at him. "Did you think I wouldn't? I was afraid you'd lose yourself in my world. I'm glad you're not." "Your grandmother was smart," he said, sitting down across from me. "She told you to keep pieces of yourself." "How did you know?" "Because that's what she told my father when he fell in love with my mother. Make sure she keeps herself." He never forgot it. He stood, kissed the top of my head, and left me to study. It was such a small thing, but it felt like freedom. My grandmother died on a Tuesday in October with sun streaming through her window and me holding her hand. She went peacefully, which is all anyone can ask for. Dante arranged the funeral, a small service at a church in Como, burial in a cemetery overlooking the lake. He stood beside me through all of it, never intrusive, always present. At the reception, an old man approached me. "You're Giovanni's granddaughter." "Yes." "I knew your grandfather, worked with him and Paolo Morti. Good men, both of them. They believed in honor, in building things that lasted." He looked at Dante, who was talking quietly with Dr. Keller. "The son is like the father. You're lucky." "I know. Don't let him lose himself in the empire. Keep him human." It was advice and benediction at once. I promised I would try. Winter came. Dante's restructuring continued. Some of his associates left, unwilling to transition to legitimate operations. Others stayed, seeing the wisdom in it. Tessari retired, sold his holdings, moved to Switzerland. The financial police found more interesting targets. Life continued. Dante asked me to marry him on New Year's Eve in the penthouse, with the city spread out below us like scattered stars. No ring, he knew better, just a question. "Will you build this with me? Not for me, with me." "Yes," I said, because it was true. Because I'd found a way to be myself while also being his. Because the debt had become choice, and the choice was mine. We married in March at the house in the Alps where we'd hidden from danger. Small ceremony, just Carlotta and Dr. Keller and a few people who mattered. I wore a simple dress and the pearl necklace, no longer alone, now a gift. He wore a suit and looked nervous, which I loved. "I promise to keep you human," I said during the vows. "I promise to keep you free," he replied. They were good promises. We've mostly kept them. 5 years later, I'm finishing my doctorate. Dante's empire is almost entirely legitimate now: logistics, real estate, a venture capital firm that invests in startups. We still live in the penthouse, but we spend weekends at the house in the Alps where it's quiet enough to think. We have a daughter. Her name is Sofia, after his mother. She's 3, fierce, and entirely unimpressed by her father's attempts at discipline. She speaks Italian and English with equal fluency, and she has my grandmother's eyes. Sometimes I think about that night in the corridor when I answered a phone call and everything changed. When I stopped being invisible and became seen. It scared me then. It doesn't anymore. Dante still brings me coffee without asking how I take it. Still puts his hand at the small of my back when we enter rooms. Still solves problems before I know they exist. But I solve problems too. I have work that matters, friends who are mine alone, a life that could exist without him, even though I never wanted to. On Sunday mornings, we take Sophia to the cemetery in Como. I tell her about her great-grandmother, about the woman who taught me to keep pieces of myself. I tell her about debt and choice, about how love should make you more, not less. Dante listens and says nothing. But later, when Sophia is napping and the house is quiet, he pulls me close and says, "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying, for building this with me, for making me better than what I was." "You did that yourself." "No, we did it together, that's the point." He's right, we did it together. From that cold night in February when I was invisible to this warm afternoon when I'm seen, not as furniture, not as leverage, not as decoration, just as Livia. The woman who answered a phone call in Italian. The woman who chose the storm and learned to dance in it. The woman who found love in the gray areas and decided it was enough. It is enough, more than enough, it's everything.